The most difficult thing when starting a business is to actually start the business. It's to get out of your comfort zone, to take the leap, and to make it happen.
Before we get into entrepreneurship, startups, or scaling companies, here is a lesser known fact about today's guest. Before he became a professor teaching entrepreneurship across Europe, he actually spent time inside investment decision making rooms, helping evaluate real companies, real founders, and real risks, which probably explains why his work on entrepreneurship feels a lot less theoretical and a lot more grounded in reality. Welcome to another episode of School to Startup, brought to you by Traction, a private market intelligence platform that's been supporting the global university ecosystem for over 12 years. Through our university partnerships, we work with institutions driving innovation and entrepreneurship, and this series highlights the academic leaders making that happen. I'm Harish, your host today. Joining me today is Miguel Meuleman, full professor of entrepreneurship and academic director of Entrepreneurship Academy at Vlerick Business School, and also a visiting professor at Imperial College London. Miguel, great to have you with us.
Nice to be here with you today.
Great. So I'll start with a slightly dangerous question. You have spent years researching entrepreneurship, teaching founders, and advising businesses. So tell me honestly, has studying entrepreneurship made you more optimistic about founders or just much better at spotting trouble every early?
Um, so I think in general, a role we have as teacher is, of course, to highlight some pitfalls that entrepreneurs will encounter. Just to give you an example, how to manage your teams. We all know how important the teams are when people start businesses, and the kind of agreements people make in a team often lead to discussions or conflicts later on. So of course, I think we need to prepare students for some of the downsides of an entrepreneurial journey, because we all know it's going to be a bumpy ride. But at the same time, we also want to be optimistic and show what kind of a thrill it can be, and by helping students connect with other people who did it before, it becomes a bit more easy to take those risks. So of course, we do see a lot of potential pitfalls, and we need to teach about these pitfalls. On the other hand, I think a very important role we play as educator is to give the people the courage, the confidence to take the leap by bringing positive stories, by showing role models, but also by teaching them maybe how to manage risks and how to deal with risk along the journey.
Interesting. You've also taught thousands of aspiring entrepreneurs over the years. So, if you had to describe your job in one sentence, would it be helping people build companies or stopping very confident people from making very avoidable mistakes?
I think from my point of view, it's really helping people to take the leap. The most difficult thing when starting a business is to actually start the business. It's to get out of your comfort zone, to take the leap, and to make it happen. And sometimes that means giving up another job and so forth. So I think my most important role is to give them the confidence to do this, to help them jump.
Interesting. Before we deep dive, quick note to everyone who are watching. If you're enjoying these conversations with academic leaders who are shaping entrepreneurship, do like the video, subscribe to Traction channel, click the bell icon for updates, and let us know in the comments what's resonating with you so far. So back to the conversation. Miguel, taking a step back, what originally pulled you towards entrepreneurship academically? And at what point did you realize this wasn't just a theory, but something deeply connected to real people and real decisions?
So I personally did my PhD in the context of corporate finance. So I studied private equity and how private equity investors how they collaborate with other types of investors. But I was always pulled towards entrepreneurship because I think it's just such an exciting space. If you look at the kind of businesses that those people start, and whether that's a startup, as someone starting from scratch, or whether it's someone buying himself or herself into entrepreneurship through acquisition, or whether it's someone managing an SME, a small and medium sized company, and maybe even a third generation owner manager. At the end of the day, those people take risks. They take a lot of responsibility. They shape the future. And I think that's just such an exciting space to work in, because after 20 years in academia or even more, I've seen some of my students build some of the largest companies in Europe. Uh, I think it's an honor just to be so closely involved in these journeys, to be in touch with those people. So that's why I was pulled away from corporate finance to entrepreneurship. And my research today is at the intersection of finance and entrepreneurship. So, for example, I will look at venture capital. I have studies on micro finance. And again, it's great to see how they start businesses, how they manage businesses, how they inject companies with entrepreneurial energy.
Amazing. You've also seen multiple generations of entrepreneurs now. So, what's the biggest change you have noticed in how students and early stage founders approach entrepreneurship today?
I will take the perspective here from the Belgian ecosystem. I think a big change in the past 20 years is that the ecosystem, the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Belgium, has developed much more. So there's many accelerators, there is these kind of innovation hubs, co-working spaces. So I think today the step into entrepreneurship has become a bit more easy. So big difference I see is that students start to connect much sooner, with potential co-founders. They connect with the ecosystem. Entrepreneurship, it's everywhere. At my business school, at the university, it's being promoted everywhere. So I think a big change I have seen is that there's just much more cultural support, but also more institutional support, including government promoting it, providing grants and subsidies. But also, if you look at the ecosystem of investors, think about business angels. There's many entrepreneurs who exited in the past 10 years who are now reinvesting what the money they made back into the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So I think the ecosystem has become much more tight. It has become easier to connect with that ecosystem because it's just much broader today. It has become easier, I believe, if you're good, to attract funding from experienced entrepreneurs who did it before. It has become easier to seek advice because there is much more advice available, because we have much more entrepreneurs who did it successfully before. So I think that's a big change. I think 20 years ago, 25 years ago, it was a bit more of a lonely kind of path, where you had to figure out yourself how to collect the resources and set up the right teams. It's still a challenge today, but I think the ecosystem has evolved much more. It's easier to knock on doors and to open doors. I think that's a big difference. And that's not only here in Belgium. If you would go to London, that's going to be exactly the same. If you go to Paris, that's going to be exactly the same. And this is something we have seen in the US. And you think about Silicon Valley for many years already. Here, this starts to take shape, or has started to take shape in the past 10, 15 years. Okay. So that's for me a big difference. Yeah.
Interesting. So you're especially known for your work on entrepreneurial buyouts. So if I put a startup founder and a buyout entrepreneur in the same room, what's the biggest mindset difference between the two?
I think I think both can be very entrepreneurial. Because I know people who acquired through entrepreneurship acquisitions relatively small companies and grew them into billion-dollar companies. So I think both often have an entrepreneurial mind. What I see as a difference is that I think the typical startup entrepreneur is less risk averse. So they are willing for a couple of years maybe to again set up a business without generating any significant income or revenue. Whereas for a buyout entrepreneur, you buy something that exists with existing cash flow, with a history. So I think maybe a buyout entrepreneur is often a bit more of the managerial type, someone who knows how to manage an existing company, how to optimize processes. But again, the most successful buyout entrepreneurs are also very entrepreneurial. It's not just taking a company and just continuing that same company and copy paste. No, it's often taking a company and bringing it to the next level by exploring new opportunities. But I think, generally speaking, startup entrepreneurs, they invent something. They start something from scratch. They start with a white sheet of paper. So they are a bit more courageous, I would say. Often they also have they have not as much funding, because if you're a buyout entrepreneur, you typically have to put at least 250,000 euros on the table as a starting amount to buy that company. If you look at the average amount invested by startup entrepreneurs, maybe 10, 15K thousand. So that's also a big difference in the amount of money they put on the table and the amount of risk they are taking. Of course, 250,000 euros, it sounds a lot, which it also is, emptying your savings account, but you buy yourself into something with a history, with maybe recurring cash flows. So the risk profile of those types of opportunities, entrepreneurial buyout opportunities, is very different as compared to a startup opportunity.
Interesting. Vlerick is known for being closely connected to the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So, in your view, what should universities stop doing, and what should they double down on if they genuinely want students to become entrepreneurs?
So let me start with the second question. So what should they do? I think, as I already mentioned, we can teach multiple courses here at Vlerick Business School. We have an entrepreneurship, by the way, at Vlerick Business School is the most important track within all the MBA programs we have. Within that entrepreneurship track, we have multiple electives. We have an elective on venture capital. We have an elective on scaling a company. We have an elective on entrepreneurial buyouts. We have an elective on SME management. I think organizing courses, of course, that helps to kind of um, provide the people with some tools and skills. But at the end of the day, the most difficult thing for people is to take the leap. It's to give up a job and to start that uncertain journey. So I think what should we do? It's to help those people connect with the ecosystem, to help them connect with other entrepreneurs, to help them connect with mentors. That's something we can do by working closely with that ecosystem. For example, in Ghent, in Belgium, we have the Winter Circus, which is a well-known technology hub. It's one of the most productive startup factories, I would call it, in Europe. um, we work very closely together. Our students, they go to meetings there, they attend presentations by entrepreneurs. So we built that bridge between the ecosystem where the real thing is happening and the classroom. And I think that is something we should do. What should we stop doing is, maybe, even if my students have to produce a business plan is only a business plan. Too much focus on that kind of purely focusing on assignments. again, at the end of the day, entrepreneurship is not a course. It's a journey. And if we treat it too much as courses with assignments where people need to be graded on the assignments, I think ultimately we want to help people take the leap. And I think my goal is not to have students with good grades. Of course, that's also good. But my goal is to have students who then, when they graduate, that are willing to take the leap, that are generating impact, that on the people who become ambitious, and meaning they also are willing to explore larger opportunities, who maybe also think globally. We just visited Silicon Valley with our MBA students last week. It's to show them that yes, we can mentality. Let's think big rather than think in terms of risks and why not to do things, you know? So that's the kind of mentality we have to give to students. Yes, we can. We can make it happen. So what should we do is to help students help to shape that mentality, that entrepreneurial mindset. That's something we should do, and connect them with the ecosystem, with role models, with mentors. What should we stop doing is maybe have too much focus on the pure academic side or the traditional school side, you know, grading and you know, assignments. No, ultimately there is a larger goal there. Okay.
Interesting. So for students watching this who feel pressure to start something now, so what would you tell them to focus on before ideas, funding, and pitch decks?
What to focus on? Of course, if you think about entrepreneurs who are working on big opportunities, it's to look into the future. Be aware of what are the new technologies that are developing, what are important societal problems. If you open a newspaper every single day, there's going to be challenges in there. So have that kind of opportunity mindset. Where there is a problem, often there is an opportunity, and problems can be more technological in nature. I think about all the technological challenges created by electrical vehicles. There's a lot of opportunities arising because of the switch to EVs. But there's many other societal problems. Just to give you an example, there is in many places around the world, there is an issue with accessibility of healthcare. There's many opportunities there. So become problem obsessed. Looking at problems, looking how problems will maybe evolve in the future, and being proactive and thinking of potential solutions. So that's certainly one recommendation I would give. Secondly, connect. The best way to get into entrepreneurship is to connect with entrepreneurs, and maybe when you think of career opportunities, rather of working for big corporates, maybe get into startups. You know, do traineeship in a startup, or get a first position in a startup. So connect yourself at an early stage with the startup scene by doing internships, by maybe accepting job positions, maybe student jobs, and so forth. And secondly, be generally interested in the problems we are facing, whether that's technological or societal or other types of problems, and look for opportunities and connect with people to start to brainstorm. Yeah.
Amazing. So the final one, bit hypothetical. If you weren't allowed to be a professor tomorrow, would you rather start a company from scratch or buy a small existing business and try to grow it? And why?
My perspective, I would rather start a company from scratch, because I've had many ideas, but I know entrepreneurship, it's not about generating ideas. Entrepreneurship is about executing on those ideas. Why would I start something from scratch? Because there's so much untapped potential. There's so many problems that today there's no companies working on these problems. I think you can start from a white sheet of paper, you know, and you can pick an area where you have a keen interest in. Um, Acquiring an existing business, it can always be an option. There's beautiful companies, and they're often not on the radar of people. People, when they think of entrepreneurship, they think of the Steve Jobs and they think of the Mark Zuckerbergs and so forth. So these tech companies, the Airbnbs, but there's plenty of small and medium-sized companies, often working maybe more B2B, working in niche markets. If you think about cell phone, mobile phone, all these components that go into that phone, that's B2B. Often we don't see these companies, but some of these businesses are top-notch. Are so I think it's also important to have that on your radar. These are buyout opportunities because I've seen so many beautiful companies. One of my students, he acquired a Whitloff farm. One of my students acquired a traditional soap manufacturing business. One of my students acquired a robotics company, and so forth. Plenty of examples of beautiful companies. And again, sometimes in these companies, you also have big opportunities to build global companies. So both pathways have merits, but I think personally myself, I would rather want to start something from scratch. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Miguel. Today's conversation with you reminded us that the entrepreneurship isn't just about the bold ideas. It's also about the mindset, discipline, and making smart decisions, whether you are starting from the scratch or building on what already exists. Thank you so much for being part of this episode of School to Startup. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Harish, and I wish you all the best, and I wish all the people who watch a lot of success in their entrepreneurial adventures. And yeah, take care.